invitation from the organizer. It has been a great moment. And I, as a member of the Department of Pediatrics in our medical school, I will address some issues regarding adherence to treatment and other psychosocial outcomes in the patients with chronic diseases, mainly cystic fibrosis, and also some results from a cohort of HIV-infected children that we follow at Unicamp. Could you please remember? Yes, thank you. In the last 30 years in Brazil, and in the last 70 years, around 70 years in the whole world, we have been living in a demographic and epidemiological transition. In Brazil, up to the 80s, and in the Western world, around World War II, the predominance of the prevalence of diseases was from acute and transmissible conditions. And those conditions were mainly due to the lack of basic prevention measures. Adequate housing, adequate nutrition, structured families, and as these conditions changed, and in Brazil I've been very happy to see these transitions happening during my career, we are now living in a state of a higher prevalence of chronic non-transmissible diseases, and they demand long-term care. You may not have cure, but you can have care. It's a sentence that's usually to refer to this kind of conditions. Next one, please. And chronic diseases are currently a global health challenge. They have an impact on mental health, increasing the prevalence of anxiety and depression in these patients, and this is seen worldwide with several different conditions. They may have an impact on the quality of life. They may be modulated by the resilience, which is the coping ability of the patients and of the society too. And the management of care may be related to personality characteristics. So every member of the family, every member of the health care team counts, and the patients need emotional support, either for the family and also from the society, to increase their ability to face the harms, and also to increase their ability for self-care. And there is a central role in adherence to treatment. So currently, we have data from the United States, the most recent review, that states that around 1/4 of children and adolescents all over the world, and especially the United States, have some kind of chronic disease. The allergic diseases are the predominant: asthma, allergic rhinitis, and dermatitis, and food allergies. But we also have a high prevalence of obesity, developmental disorders, diabetes, consequences of prematurity, and also rare diseases like cystic fibrosis, and as a whole set, rare diseases are very important epidemiologically. Next, please. Thank you. So chronic diseases, they have a very complex arrangement that is needed for their treatment. And they may have an impact on mental health and other outcomes. When we are working with patients with chronic diseases, we have to address issues related to the patient, and in pediatrics, we have to assess issues related to the caregivers, mothers, fathers, and legal caregivers too. And all of these experiences we have to take in account as professionals. And a very specific team regarding the management of chronic diseases is adolescents. We have several patients who are adolescents. It's a challenging step in life cycle. there is a trend to increase the age span of adolescents to 24 years old. So I think a few of you are adolescents yet. And if you get this population, it encompasses 25% of the world population. 1/4 of the world population is between 10 and 24 years old. So it's a very important segment of the population. And adolescents have to manage the transition from childhood, where most of the care was provided by the parents, to adult life, where they have to be able to self-care. And there are several emotional changes and developments, especially because earlier in the adolescence, we have the development of the limbic system in the central nervous system. And the limbic system is the region of the brain which is responsible for the emotions. So adolescents are very emotional. They tend to think in short term. They tend to underestimate the risks. And just a little later, we have the development of the so-called executive functions of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex. So this mismatch between emotion, between peer pressure, and executive function is just completed around 24, 25 years of age. So adolescence is a very sensitive step in the life cycle. Next, please. And youth and adolescents living with chronic diseases live a period of challenging changes, and they may suffer from the impact, from the discrimination, from stigma, and from their perception of social and behavioral limits that may be hard to face by the adolescents. And these emotional, physical, and social harms may impact on the quality of life. Next, please. So, how can we work together with the families, with the patients, to improve the care? We have to change the paradigm as professionals. We have to change from a disease-centered care to a person-centered care. So the person is more important than the disease. And the healthcare team must be multidisciplinary, must be focused on the well-being of the patients. And the whole set, the whole ecological environment of the children and adolescents, school, society, culture, community, and family must be prepared. Next, please. For the health team, it's important to work in an environment of multidisciplinarity. Which are the values that must be shared by the team? The interests and values must be shared between the members, and the focus must be the patient. There must be cooperation between the members, shared leadership. There's not only leader, the physician must be the leader. No, maybe in some competences, nurses, social workers, psychologists must be more competent than the physician. And so in some actions, other professionals, physical therapists, physical educators, may be the leaders. There must be a horizontal dynamics of changes in cooperation and free information circulation. Next, please. And so, how can the healthcare team, working in a multidisciplinary approach, evaluate the well-being of the patients? And then comes another changing paradigm, is the use of the patient-reported outcome measures, or PROMs. Patient PROMs are basically tools, mainly questionnaires, that we may use to see how the patients feel or function in relation to their health, with no interference from the professionals. The PROMs are the voice of the patient. And there are several outcomes that we may measure: quality of life, resilience, social support, family support, mental health, and so on. So we have currently in Brazil several instruments that are validated to measure these outcomes. Next, please. Quality of life. Let's see some results we had with the working in cooperation with the cystic fibrosis group, and also working with the teenagers we follow that are seropositive for HIV. Quality of life is very important because quality of life is a perception by the individual of his or her position in life, in context with the culture and value systems related to objectives, expectations, standards, and concerns. So quality of life is not an external measure. Sometimes we see, for example, an advertisement for a new community. So you may have a big house, a pool, and a fitness center. It's quality of life for you. Actually, in healthcare, it's not quality of life. Quality of life is the perception by the individual. Could you see, please, just quickly, Renan, thank you. In quality of life, 2 more, please. Thanks. And quality of life has several domains: environment, biologic, psychological, and social. Thank you. Next, please. From 2014 to 2016, a linear nest of psychologists worked in this project. We evaluated children with cystic fibrosis, children with HIV infection, and a control group of healthy children regarding several domains of quality of life using the ICOL instrument. And what and the patients had between 16 to 22 years old. And what did we find? No differences regarding quality of life in every domain. The patients, their perception, even having severe disease, the general perception of the patient was not different from the perception of the adolescents from the control group. We may say that the patients with chronic diseases in our reference centers are cared in an integral way. We do the best we can. That's true. But also, healthy adolescents in Brazil, they don't have an easy life. We know. So maybe what is important to know is the perception of these patients. Next, please. Thank you. When we go to the caregivers, we could see that the caregivers of children with HIV had lower physical health perception and lower general health perception, lower total scores in the ICOL instrument. So this segment of the population of caregivers was more affected in relation to quality of life. Maybe in relation to the social stigma that is perceived by HIV-infected people. Next, please. And regarding this issue, we followed a cohort of recently infected young people, mainly from the community here in Campinas, and what we could see regarding quality of life. In the moment the kids receive their diagnosis, there's usually a low perception of quality of life compared to healthy, age-matched individuals, 16 to 24 in this case. But for every domain of the ICOL instrument, the scores were lower in the HIV-infected adolescents and young adults. But as the experience with the disease progresses, as they enter to the integral care provided by the reference center, you see at 6 and 12 months, there's no difference anymore. So these kids have an emotional development, and they become more able to face the challenges associated with HIV infection. Next, please. Adherence to treatment. The ability of the patient to follow the recommendations from the healthcare team. Physical therapy, medicines, inhalation medicines. It's very complex, it's a very complex issue to be studied because more than medicines, it includes treatment regimen, information, cultural issues, family routine, clinical laboratory care, and also the subjective issues, anxiety, depression, acceptance of the condition, quality of bond with the healthcare care providers. It's very dynamic and multifactorial, and the treatment plans must be tailored to the patient's needs and habits. Next, please. Regarding cystic fibrosis, what we could see was that the adherence in a weekly basis for several medicines and procedures was higher when the caregiver was the responsible in managing the therapy. So even sometimes we see the parents saying, well, my kid is 16. I think he's mature enough. I can give him the responsibility of the treatment. We must be working in educating the adolescents for self-care. But the adults, the caregivers, must always be supervising because as our study was not the only to see, there is a difference when the caregivers show a commitment to the treatment. Next, please. There are some factors in our HIV cohort that were associated with non-adherence, intolerance to the medicines, difficulty of taking the medicines, having the medicine that managed only by the patient, so we could get the same results from the cystic fibrosis and from the HIV cohort. Lower social class, lack of religious practice, and this was not like having faith or not having faith, but participating in the community activities of the church. Next, please. Resilience is another very important issue. Resilience is the ability to overcome adverse conditions or situations involving risk to well-being, development, and mental health. Can you go to the following? Thank you. What we saw regarding caregivers. In our study with HIV, caregivers from HIV kids, cystic fibrosis kids, and the control group, we saw that the parents of the children with cystic fibrosis showed a lower resilience score. So maybe the care of cystic fibrosis patients may be so demanding that the family may become overwhelmed by the needs of the patients. Next, please. Satisfaction with life. Another outcome we can study is the cognitive element expressing the well-being. It's a person's overall assessment of his or her own life. You can go to the next. What we saw in our cohort of HIV-infected patients that we followed for 1 year, when they received their diagnosis, satisfaction with life was much lower compared to health controls. But 6 months, 12 months in care, and there were no difference. And at 12 months in care, there were no differences anymore. So we think that there may be a development of the abilities of individuals to perceive their own satisfaction with life. Family support is another important ability of the family to provide care, attention, affection, dialogue, empathy, autonomy, freedom, and independence to their youth. Next, please. And what we saw that was very interesting regarding the kids with HIV, kids with cystic fibrosis, and healthy kids, we didn't see differences regarding family support for these 3 groups. Next, please. Mental health is another very important issue. The impact on mental health of a chronic disease diagnosis in a young person can begin at the time of the discovery of the diagnosis. Next, please. So, when we studied some mental health outcomes, like depression and anxiety, we could see that usually the youth with HIV showed a higher prevalence of depression compared to CF in the control group. And for the caregivers, also the caregivers of children with HIV had a higher prevalence of depression and anxiety too. So these populations, either patients and caregivers, they need support, psychological support from the healthcare team. Next, please. I think this will be the last one. So I think in accordance to this data, the outcome measures must be used in the